to our country. Let's give him a clap. And as we say in Ghana, Akwaba, you say bienvenido. We will say Akwaba to you for this long trip across the Atlantic to West Africa and to Africa. We welcome you. Venezuela for us is very important because Venezuela is an example of a country which is struggling to reassert its independence and its sovereignty, to assert its control over its own natural resources. And we see how the empire, how the imperialist countries are fighting against it. These kind of battles is common to all of us in the third world countries. And so what is happening in Venezuela is very, very critical and crucial for us. Again, the oxygen of knowing what is happening in Venezuela must come through the media. And you know that the media is being controlled again by the empire. And so they sanitize what they allow for it to come to us. And for those of us in Africa, especially who do not have access to Telesu and other progressive media, it becomes even more difficult. So we are very happy today that the minister himself is here in Ghana in order to share the experiences and the struggles of the people of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela with us. We've had the Venezuelan Solidarity Campaign for quite a while. We've had contacts with them, especially with the ambassador who is resident in Benin at a certain time. Some of our comrades have been to Venezuela. Indeed, we were expecting to have gone to Venezuela in February for a conference of the peoples, which was being organized by the Pan-African Today Secretariat, which is based in South Africa, under the auspices of the National Union of Metal Workers. But because the Venezuelan government has to go to its people for a reaffirmation of its loyalty, for a reaffirmation of its confidence in the government, an election is being called. And so that conference has been postponed. In any case, today we are all here, we are all ears. We want to welcome His Excellency, the Minister, to come and share with us what he has brought from Venezuela for us. Thank you very much. Yes.
Merci beaucoup. Hello, how are you? Mucho gusto en conocerlos. Nice to meet you. Well, in this moment, I am not the guest or the interviewer. I will present the person that is the Vice Minister for African Affairs of Venezuela in the context of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela. Myself, I am the Ambassador of Venezuela devant the President Akufo-Addo. My base is in Cotonou, and I have the pleasure to be the ambassador designated here for the government of Ghana, in front of the government of Ghana. But I would like to introduce the main representative of Venezuela from the part of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Venezuela, the Vice Minister, Yuri Pimentel, who is in a grand tournée in Africa do l'Oeste, or in West Africa, which opened with Benin, Togo, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and Mali. So, without anything else to say, because I know that we have been waiting a lot, I will let the floor for Yuri Pimentel, our Vice Minister for Africa and Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night. Good evening to all our friends of the Freedom Center, our friends ambassadors from Algeria, Palestine, from Sahrawi Republic. We're very glad to be here. We're very glad to be in Ghana, in Africa. Commander Hugo Chavez used to say that we had to see Africa not just as friends or another continent. He used to call Africa our Mother Africa, because, yes, because he used to say that our blood, our formation, the way we think and we see the world in Latin America, and especially in Venezuela, is very much related with Africa, with the African roots that we have in Venezuela. So that's why Commander Hugo Chavez always spoke about Africa. I'm going to give you an example. We just had relations before the Bolivarian Revolution. We had diplomatic relations with about 20 countries in Africa, and we had 6 embassies. Now we have 18 embassies, and we have relations with all the African countries, from all the 55 African countries. So this is a different view, a different approach. This is the vision that Commander Hugo Chavez and now President Nicolás Maduro has always promoted, the vision of solidarity and friendship between Venezuela and Africa, and also the rest of the world, especially the relations, the South-South relations. Some of the African leaders are an example for us from the past. One of them was from here in Ghana. President Nkrumah was an example for the Bolivarian Revolution. The same ideas we have now, he was already speaking about it 50 years ago. And what do we want? What all of us want? To develop ourselves, to have a society with social justice, with a fair distribution of the wealth, with independence, with sovereignty. That's what we are fighting for in Venezuela since the Bolivarian Revolution started in 1999. That's what we want. But, you know, we are all around the world we are facing problems, historically. But in Venezuela, we have another problem. We are very close, very, very close to the big empire, you know, and the big power of the United States. They were used that Latin America and the Caribbean was what they call their backyard, you know, and they used to change the governments and to decide who was governing each country in our continent. And that all changes when President Chavez arrived to power in Venezuela. You may know Venezuela, why all the problems with the United States? Venezuela has the first oil reserves in the world, the first. We also have the second coltan reserves in the world. We have the 4th or 5th place in gold, in other metals and other minerals. That's why they are so interested in Venezuela. And historically they have tried, and they've, since the beginning of the Bolivarian Revolution, they have tried to overthrow our government. Maybe you all remember in 2002 when the coup d'etat against President Hugo Chavez, with some traitors from the military, they took him out of power for just a couple of days because the people went to the streets, and with the nationalist and socialist military, they put President Chavez back in power. It was in April of 2002. But since President Chavez died, they saw their opportunity. They say now is the time for us to overthrow the Bolivarian Revolution, to end this government. And since the first day when President Chavez died in 2013, they have gone very hard against President Maduro. And one of the things that they managed to do is a very well-organized international media campaign against Venezuela, against President Maduro. I'm sure that you all have been seeing, when you see some news about Venezuela, it's violence and problems and poverty and people in the streets. But that's not the reality in my country. We have problems. We have economical problems, we have social problems, but there was one decision, and President Maduro always says this. We have problems. Some of them because of the imperialism, because they are sanctioning us, they are blockading us, like they have done with Cuba for more than 50 years. You all know what I'm speaking about. But President Maduro always says, in our case, if things really get bad, we know where we will stand. And we will stand always with the people, not with the rich people, not with the oligarchs, not with the businessmen or the transnationals. We will stand always with the Venezuelan people. And that's what we have been doing. With all the problems we are facing, President Maduro never stopped the social programs for the benefit of the Venezuelans. He never stopped the solidarity, international solidarity. Before I came here, 4 days ago, there is the Palestine ambassador here. I was with the ambassador of Palestine in Venezuela, Linda Ali. They were commemorating the anniversary, what they call the Day of the Land of Palestine. Maybe some of you don't know about this. It was a repression of the Israelis against Palestinians 42 years ago, where they killed 7 students. And since then, every year they celebrate this causes day of. It was because they want to take them out of some lands, and the people was protesting against this. And but in that same day, we were celebrating, and there were a group of around 40 students from Palestine. They are studying in Venezuela medicine, you know, and more than 100 students from students from Palestine have been graduated in medicine in Venezuela. With all the problems we have, we will never stop the solidarity, because that's our obligation, like Cuba has done in the past. Cuba is an example for all of us. Maybe you don't know, but just recently, 20 students from Ghana have graduated in Venezuela. They were studying medicine. 17 students from Benin, 20 students from Togo, students from Mali. 1 month ago, 56 students from Mali arrived in Venezuela. They are studying sports in our university. But we don't say this because we want people to know and to be grateful. No, it's our obligation, because we are revolutionaries, and the revolution is we are obligated to be solidarity and to have solidarity with other countries and with other people, because we know we also receive solidarity from all of you, and we appreciate that. I wanted to say to this organization in particular, the Freedom Center, I know that through the years we have been a factor here in Ghana to say and to speak the truth about Venezuela. When the media hides, and the big media hides the information about Venezuela, I know that we always can count with your voice to stand up and say the truth to the people. That's what is most important for us. Since last year, we all know who's now in the White House, Mr. Donald Trump. And we always had problems with the United States, but now the situation it's a more dangerous situation, we could say. Not just for Venezuela, for all the world. You can see what's happening today. They are threatening to bomb Syria because they created some lies about the situation in Syria. Last week, he declared the war against trade war against China, with all the consequences of this. We all know what he has decided about changing and to accept that Jerusalem is the supposed capital of Israel, and the consequences of this. How many people has died just because of this crazy decision? Have died in the streets of all the Middle East and in Palestine land. This is the kind of crazy decisions that this person is taking. About Venezuela, last year they promoted, this is, I want to inform you about this. Last year, maybe you saw lots of images of violence in the streets in Venezuela, in Caracas. And what would the media say? They would say, oh, the government is repressing the people that is protesting because of the problems of the country. That's not the reality. We have problems, but the people who was protesting, they weren't the poor people. This was the upper and middle upper and the upper class. This happened not in the poor neighborhoods. This happened in the places that they control, where the rich people live. And they took to the streets. President Maduro, even to avoid any possibility of confrontation, he said to the police and the National Guard, when you go to the streets to stop them when they try to break things and to burn things, go without guns. So our police went to the streets to face these protests, violent protests, even without carrying any gun. So the people who died in the streets, it wasn't the government's fault. There was an example. Last year, on July 30, we had an election for the National Constituent Assembly in Venezuela. It was an election that was called by President Maduro. And that day, because we had this election, the opposition, they said they would sabotage the election. So they were very, very violent that day. They put bombs and killed people. They tried to stop people to go and vote. But on that day, they threw a bomb, how do you call it, a Molotov bomb against the police. There was some policemen who were on their bicycles. And they throw them a Molotov bomb, very big one. And the media took the picture with the fire and the policeman. 4 policemen were wounded by this Molotov bomb. But when you see the media on the other day, they were saying that this explosion, it was caused by the police that was repressing the poor protesters. You know, this is the kind of, if you don't know what's really happening, they can change the reality and lie to you. And that's what we have been facing through lots of years, but especially since President Maduro is in power, the lies have increased. The media is very much against us. Because as you know, maybe you read something on a newspaper in Ghana, and maybe it's not the fault of the newspaper because they all take from the same news agencies, Associated Press or Reuters or another one. There are 3 or 4 in the world that control the news, and they have their own interests behind these news media corporations. That's what we have to fight. It's not easy. It's a very difficult task. So since last year, when Donald Trump took the power in the United States, they start with sanctions against Venezuela. They start and they try to stop us to have the possibility of realize and to manage financial operations. I'm going to give you an example. We sell oil in the United States. The United States is one of our clients from long years, lots of years ago. We sell them the oil. When the company that buys the oil to us wants to pay, they have lots of problems because the banks, they stop all the transactions related with Venezuela. And I'm going to give you another example. Our embassies, just a small example. We try to send, like all the embassies in the world, we send your embassy, how do you work? From your capital, they send the money so you can pay the salaries of the workers and the rents, etc. When we try to send some money to our embassies, normally they stop. Then we have to try how to reach to the embassy on another way to make the transaction. This makes things very complicated, you know, very hard. We even lose lots of money in this when we try to reach by one way or the other. So this has lots of consequences. We try. There's a lot of hypocrisy in all of this because now they try to say, oh, Venezuela has a humanitarian crisis. You know, this is the word. This is not casual. They say Venezuela has a humanitarian crisis because what they want, if the United Nations says that Venezuela has a humanitarian crisis, they will have the excuse to intervene with troops on the ground. This is what they are looking for. But they say we have a humanitarian crisis. In some cases, we have a shortage of medicines. But let me explain. When we want to buy the medicines, we go to the international market. Let's say we want to buy some medicines in Ghana. I'm going to give you an example. We come here, we have the money, we say, please, sell me these medicines for Venezuelan people. And you agree, and you sell us the medicines, but we have to pay so you can send the medicines. When we try to pay, it starts all these problems, the blockade. No, you can't pay, you can't pay, you can't pay. If you can pay, the company is not going to send you the medicine. This happens with food. This happens with lots of other things. So they say we have a humanitarian crisis, but the ones they are creating the humanitarian crisis are them, because they are stopping us to have a normal. What we want is to have, let me receive my payments and we don't need your help, you know. We don't need your help. Just let us use our own money that we have because we sell oil or other things we sell, and let me use it in the international market like any other country. But they stop us to doing this, you know. I want to alert you, because when you hear about Venezuela and they speak about humanitarian crisis, this is not casual. This is a dossier, like they are trying to achieve and to put in the people's minds that we have problems, so they will have the excuse to intervene with troops. And of course, if they intervene with troops, you know when they arrive, you don't know when they leave, you know. And in Africa, you have lots of experience with this in some African countries, where they invent these excuses. What's behind all of that? Is the interest to take our natural resources, you know, for free. Look at what happened with Libya. I'm not going to defend anyone. We were friends of President Gaddafi. President Chavez and President Maduro. We were very close friends of President Gaddafi. But maybe some people could have another opinion. But look the disaster they created in Libya. And Libya had more than $300 million in European Union banks. Where is that money? The money disappeared. Now no one knows where is the Libyan money from the previous government. You know this is true. Now, a couple of weeks ago, they were speaking about this. Where is the Libyan money? Disappeared. Where it disappeared? In the French banks, Swiss banks? Because that's historically, the North always tries to steal from us. Call it Africa, call it Latin America, call it Asia. It's the same situation everywhere. So this is what we are facing. We are facing difficult times in Venezuela and in the world, all around the world. But in Venezuela, President Maduro, it was a geniality. Last year, when the violence was, you know, really hard in the streets, and it was difficult because, as I said, if President Maduro decided to repress and to send the police and the troops to the streets, this would stop in one day. But maybe the human cost would be very big. So he didn't want to do this. He tried to move things peacefully, as peacefully as he could. So he called it to elections. He called to elections. He called for a national constituent assembly. This is written in our constitution, where he said if the elite, because he tried to speak and have a dialogue with the opposition, but they refused. And he said, if the elite refuses, let's put the people, the dialogue will start from the people, with their vote, with their decision. We were expecting, because they were sabotaging the elections, as I told you, they were trying to stop people to go and vote. And this was on July 30, and we were expecting that maybe the opposition tried that around 2 million people could vote. We were expecting that maybe 4 to 5 million people would vote. And at the end, the people gave us a lesson, both to us and to the opposition. Almost 9 million people went to the polls and voted that day. And that was very, very important, because with the people presence in the polls, even some people that is not in favor of the government, but they didn't want more violence. They wanted to stop the violence. And that same day, the day after the voting process, the peace arrived. All the protests stopped because they lost all their credibility, the opposition. But since then, they started to promote all these sanctions against Venezuela. We had another election last year because they say we are a dictatorship. But in 18 years of Bolivarian revolution, we had 25 elections, 25 in 18 years. President Lula from Brazil, he used to say that we were addicted to elections because we had more than one election per year. And he said, I don't know, Venezuela maybe has an excess of democracy because people is always participating and taking decisions. Last year we had another election after the Constituent Assembly. On October 15, we had to choose our governors, the governors of the states. We have 23 states, and we have 23 governors in those states. We went to an election, the opposition participated, all the opposition participated. And they all participated united, because it's not like you have 10 candidates from the opposition. No, they get united, it's just one from the opposition against one from the government. And in 23 states, the Bolivarian Revolution forces won 19 states. We won 19 of the governors. So they could not tell anymore to the world that we didn't have support. Because if you go to an election and in 23 candidates, in 23 states, we win 19, they couldn't say, so they started to say, it's a fraud. It was a fraud in the electoral system. And when people ask him, where is the fraud? Oh, well, maybe tomorrow I'll present some proofs. We're still waiting for these proofs. Because our electoral system is one of the best in the world, with audits before the election, during the election process, and after the election process. We are invited as some members of the Freedom Center to participate. We'll have the presidential election on May 20, in about one month. And we are inviting you to go, and you can go and see whatever you want to see about the voting process. For you to know, we are also inviting the African Union to participate. We are inviting ECOWAS to send observation to our elections. Because, you know, normally the North comes to observe our elections, you know, the European Union and Washington, and no. We prefer that the African Union and the CARICOM from the Caribbean and the organizations from the South go and observe our process. But we also invited the United Nations. So anyone can go and see how clear and how transparent is the Venezuelan electoral system. Also last year in December, we had municipal elections. Some of the opposition, because of their defeat in the governor elections, didn't want to participate. We have 335 municipalities. It's like where we choose the mayors. I don't know if you have an equivalent here. We choose the mayors for the cities. So in 335 mayors that we had to choose, 309 that won the election belonged to the Bolivarian, the revolutionary forces. And this year, because they were, from 2 years ago, they were asking, oh, we have to go to a presidential election. No one wants Maduro. Maduro is hate. Everyone hates Maduro. He's a dictator. They said since 2016. But our constitution establishes that the elections is each 6 years. So the year for the elections is this year, is 2018, according to our constitution. So President Maduro, when this year started, he called and he said, okay, let's have elections. And he called for an election that had to take place this year. But now the opposition say, no, now you don't want elections. We don't want elections anymore, because if you go to elections, this is a dictatorship. It's crazy to understand. It's difficult. But this is true. It's not a joke. Huh? Maybe you think I'm joking. No, it's true. They were, during 2 years, asking for presidential elections in Venezuela. Now that President Maduro and the electoral power in Venezuela called to elections, they say they won't participate. Because they know they very recently, that's why I spoke to you about the elections of the governors and the municipalities. Because in the media and international, they say they are the majority. But when people goes and vote, even with all the problems we are facing, people knows that the only solution, the only program that people can trust in Venezuela for government is the socialist power program and the socialist and the revolutionary program of the Bolivarian revolution. Even with the problems, people knows that they prefer to vote for the Bolivarian forces, for the Chavista movements and parties and President Maduro, and not for the opposition, because this is an opposition that depends completely on the North. We had a process of dialogue. President Maduro has called to dialogue more than 300 times. Last year, he called to a dialogue again. And the president of Dominican Republic, this is a country in the Caribbean, the president of Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, he is a president, acting president. He accepted to participate as a mediator between the government and the opposition. And a former president of Spain called Rodríguez Zapatero also accepted to participate. They had meetings during 2 months, every day. And they had these items, like some issues that we had to agree between the two parts. And slowly we started to agree in both. It's not a unified program, but it's some things that had to do with electoral conditions and some other areas, the invitation to the United Nations as observers in the election. So we agree in all the points. We just had one difference. It was about the date to call the presidential election. President Maduro wanted the election in March. The opposition wanted the election in May. And then, this is the only difference we had, it was this one. So they got in a meeting for lots of hours, and we agreed, okay, let's put the election in April. Okay, it was on 22nd of April. We accepted to change the date of the election. Everything was ready to sign the agreement on the dialogue. Both parts, the opposition and the government, went to Dominican Republic. The president of the Dominican Republic, he was part of this process. He was assisting to the meeting, so he knows the truth, what was spoken there. He had the agreements on a table with the pens ready to sign. And that day, now he's not in the government anymore, but that day, Rex Tillerson, you remember Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of the State Department of the United States. He was on a trip through Latin America, and he was in Bogota that day. We have proofs. He called the leaders of the opposition and told them not to sign. They were in a table with us, with the president of our republic, during 2 months. We agreed on all the issues. And the day they had to sign, they received the order and they say, no, we are not going to sign. This is the kind of opposition we have. It's not a nationalist opposition, because an opposition is always needed, because government can commit mistakes. But it should be a nationalist, at least some people that defends their own country, not an opposition that goes around the world asking for sanctions and asking even military invasion. Some of them have asked for military invasion on part of the United States. Last year, in November, Donald Trump spoke about, we are very close to Venezuela. If they don't behave, maybe someday we'll send the Marines and the troops. This is the kind of situation we have to face. But now, that's what I want to share. My country now is in peace in the streets. People, we are working very hard to move forward our economy with all the difficulties and the blockade. We have some examples in the world like Cuba that have resisted for more than 50 years. If Cuba did it, we can also do it, Cuba is an example. We are facing our situation. We'll have elections. One part of the opposition is participating in the electoral process. They have a candidate. We'll have elections on next May 20. And we are very sure that President Maduro is going to win. But let's think for a moment that people decide the other way. We will respect it, because our process, we are a revolution. We are so democratic. That's what President Chavez always teaches us. So in the case of, in a strange situation, the people that would vote on the majority for the opposition candidate, we would respect it. But we are sure this is not going to happen. But one of the things that President Maduro has said to the future, we have to change. First of all, we have to focus on the economy for the next government. After the election, we have to work very hard on a different economy. We have depended too much on oil through the time. We have to diversify our economy. And President Maduro said, we have to diversify our economy, but we also have to diversify our relations with the world. Even during the revolution, we still depend too much on the United States and the European Union. We have to change this. We have to, not to depend, we have to exchange and be connected much more with Africa, with Asia, with Latin America and the Caribbean, not with the North, because the North is not interested in our development. This is our reality. They are, even when they come with a friendly speech, you know, behind all of this, what they are interested in is in our wealth, in our resources. And that's something we always have to be aware of. And this is the intention, this is why I'm here today. President, recently we went to Nigeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, to both Congos, Kinshasa and Brazzaville. We went to Ethiopia, we went to Egypt, now we went to Benin, Togo. We are here today, we are going in tomorrow, we are going to go to Côte d'Ivoire, we are going to Senegal, we are going to Cape Verde, and Mali, and also other countries in the very near future, because we have a clear intention of developing strong bonds with Africa. And you know, sometimes it happened in Latin America. Sometimes not all the governments in Latin America were socialists, you know, not all the governments were progressive. But if we have governments that are prepared to work with us in a vision of development and working together for the benefit of our peoples, we are ready to do it, you know? Because in this dangerous world with these crazy people that is in power, and this is really dangerous people, you know? Even for their own parameters. Look at the last decisions this guy took. He changed. Tillerson was bad. But now the guy who's now in the State Department is worse, Mike Pompeo. This guy comes from the CIA. Now the director of the CIA is a lady that used to be a torturer. They named there was a general as not secretary, advisor of national security, McMaster, and he changed this guy for another one that is worse, John Bolton. This Bolton was so bad, so crazy, that he was expelled from the government of George W. Bush, you know? It's strange now, we remember George W. Bush and it looks like a very, you know, normal government. In that time he was like a crazy guy, but this is worse. And this is something we have to be very aware, and these are dangerous times. But that's why this information, I'm sorry to speak so much, but I think it's important for you to have the information, because to go against all the big media and all the lies against Venezuela, people need information. The information is the only weapon we have, you know, the truth, to speak with our friends, that our friends that are solidary with us, go and spread the word. And if you have an opportunity, you say, no, that's not what is happening in Venezuela. And I invite you, maybe not all of you, it's impossible for you to go, all of you, but some of you that can participate in our electoral process and go and to assist and to see how is the reality in the streets of Venezuela. Even some friends of us, not enemies, some friends, with all the bombardment, at some moment they say, oh, the situation is very bad in Venezuela. And when they arrive there, maybe they think they are going to a place in a war, in violence in the streets. And that's not the reality, you know. We are just like in Ghana or other countries, struggling every day, kids going to school, everyone's going to work. And we have our process. We have our process. We believe in socialism. We believe in the legacy of Commander Hugo Chavez, and that's what we are fighting for. Because some people try to take us and to confuse us and say, oh, Chavez was one thing, Maduro is different, you know. Of course, Maduro is not Chavez. This is not a secret. Chavez is a historical leader, you know, like maybe Nkrumah here. This kind of leadership doesn't appear every day, you know, or President Arafat. This is not a leader that appears, you know, every week. These are great leaders, historical leaders. But President Maduro, you can be sure, is very loyal with the legacy of President Chavez. And he's struggling very hard together with the people of Venezuela to build a revolution, to build a socialist process in Venezuela. And very important for us is to count on your help and your friendship around the world, especially in what President Chavez used to call our Mother Africa. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you. If you have any questions, whatever, any doubt, I'm here to.
Yeah, we just heard His Excellency Mr. Bolivar, the Vice Minister for African Affairs of Venezuela, give us a true insight, an alternative to what the main media has been telling us and bombarding us with all this while. We've heard it from the horse's own mouth. I'd now like to call on Mr. Kwesi Pratt to give a message. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the comrade from coming and helping us to understand the situation in Venezuela. We are all very deeply worried about the situation in Venezuela, not because the government of Venezuela is making mistakes, not because of what the Western media says and so on, but because the sabotage against Venezuela is very deep and frightening. Venezuela is dealing with a nuclear power. Venezuela is dealing with a very aggressive country which has perhaps the largest stockpile of chemical and biological weapons. And on top of that, the mental stability of the leadership in the US is suspect. This is a very dangerous cocktail, and that's what makes us very worried and very vigilant. I'd like to assure His Excellency that because of the Nkrumah legacy and its deepness in Ghanaian politics and life and so on, Venezuela has many friends in Ghana and has a lot of goodwill in Ghana. Indeed, we put this meeting together at a very short notice. And it also happens that today is the day on which the Chinese ambassador is leaving, and there's a big farewell for the Chinese ambassador, so many of our friends are there. Today also happens to be a day on which there are many important fora on new developments in Ghanaian policies that I do not want to discuss, but I'm sure you have heard of the attempt to establish a US military base in Ghana. So there's a lot of attention also on that score and so on. So there are so many important things happening. But in spite of that, we have here some of the best friends of Venezuela. Indeed, it's important to recognize that the embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran is represented here. The embassy of Algeria is also represented here. In fact, the Saudi Arab Democratic Republic is represented by the ambassador himself, which is most significant. And then we have amongst us His Excellency the Ambassador of Palestine, who is also here with us. It is important also to recognize that the national chairman of the Progressive People's Party is also here with us. We also have with us the national chairman of the People's National Convention. He's also here with us. And the national organizer of the National Democratic Congress, Mr. Kofi Adams, is also here with us. And then there's a very small delegation from the Convention People's Party, which is also here with us. And then we have the Secretary of the Socialist Forum of Ghana, who is also chairing the event, is here with us. And then we have a few members from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which used to be led by Kwame Turi, the late Kwame Turi. They are also here with us. And then I see amongst us also one or two members from the African Youth Improvement Foundation, which is based in the University of Ghana. Now, if we were to bring all the friends of Venezuela together, we probably need Parliament House or something bigger than that, you know. But this is just to welcome you and to assure you that no matter what happens, our solidarity is with the government and people of Venezuela. We solidarize with the people and government of Venezuela not because we are kind, not because they are very special people and so on. We solidarize with the people of Venezuela because we are in the same shape with Venezuela. We solidarize with the people of Venezuela because our faith is inextricably linked with that of not just Venezuela, but all countries and all people fighting to preserve their independence. So our solidarity is with Venezuela, our solidarity is with Cuba, our solidarity is with Palestine, our solidarity is with the Sahrawi people, our solidarity is with the people of Yemen. Not many people are talking about Yemen, but the atrocities which are being committed in Yemen, we cannot look on in silence. We've got to rise up in solidarity with the people of Yemen. Today, the United States of America is complaining about some chemical attack in Syria. And it is obvious that this chemical attack was staged by the CIA. It is obvious that they staged the chemical attack themselves in order to create a pretext for attack. Why is the US not complaining about the hundreds of thousands of Yemenis who are being killed on a daily basis with weapons supplied by the US, supplied by Britain and so on? Why is the US not complaining? This double standard is repugnant in the extreme. And it takes progressive people who stand up against violence, against oppression, against exploitation and so on, to say no to this nonsense. You understand? The world has become an extremely dangerous place. Extremely dangerous place. I suspect very, very seriously that maybe by tomorrow morning a few bombs will drop in Syria. What will be the purpose of dropping bombs in Syria? To weaken the Syrian government so that these terrorists who take out the human heart and eat it raw and so on will thrive in Syria. And I think we have a responsibility to ourselves, to generations yet unborn, and to the world to stand up for justice. And especially if you are in Ghana, your responsibility is double. One, because of the legacy of Nkrumah, and because of the threats that we face in Ghana ourselves, the progressive community. On behalf of all of us who are gathered here, I'd like to say a very big thank you to His Excellency for showing up. This is a very small place. This is not one of the lovely places in this country and so on. This is a hard place. You saw how we struggled to turn off the generator when we came and so on. But this is a place of solidarity, it's a place of action, and it's a place for thinking. like to spend 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, to brief Your Excellency on some of the things that we do here. The Socialist Forum of Ghana was established about 15 years ago, a little more than 15 years ago, with the sole objective of just raising the flag of socialism. At that time, there were big debates amongst us. Should we call ourselves socialists or not, and so on. Because socialism was under retreat. And we said, we will call ourselves socialists in spite of the risks and dangers. And we have existed for so long. So here, we publish books. And indeed, we've published about 10 books within the period of our existence. And one of the most interesting books we've published is a book called The Great Deception, an account of how the CIA overthrew the Nkrumah government. And we depended on the declassified documents of the CIA to publish that book. In fact, we've published 4 editions of that book already. You know, that's one of the things that we've done. We've also published a book which is titled A Response to Anti-Nkrumahist Provocation. It's also one of the most popular books that we've published. But in all, we've published about 10 books, pamphlets, leaflets, and so on. This is what we do. We have a printing press which does that. Then, in addition to that, we have actually established a bookshop, which is called the Freedom Bookshop. And the purpose of the Freedom Bookshop is to ensure that books written about Nkrumah and by Nkrumah and other progressive leaders are available to the Ghanaian people. So that's all we do. We make sure that books by Frantz Fanon, books by Nkrumah, and so on are always available. And through the bookshop, we've also established what we call the Legacy Project. So what we're doing is that all the universities, all the important institutions in this country, we are making sure that they get all the books of Nkrumah. So we buy the books ourselves, we take them to the universities, we take them to the trading colleges, to the polytechnics, and put them in their library so that they have access to these books. Of course, one of the books we have published is a Marxist study, manual, Marxist study manual, which is being used a lot in Southern Africa and Eastern Africa and so on. I mean, the Metal Workers Union of South Africa is using a Marxist study manual for their studies and so on. So that's also something that we have done. And then we have established just on your left a library, small library. But all the books you cannot find, anywhere in any library in Ghana, you find it here. Books by Nkrumah, books by Fanon, books on Chavez, books written by Castro, Mandela, everything, they're all here. And it's a pleasure if you come here in the afternoon and you see young people in the reading room reading these books and so on. It's just a pleasure. Now, in addition to all of this, we are a very active group. We do not just do Venezuelan solidarity. We do Cuban solidarity, we do Palestine solidarity, we do Sahrawi solidarity, we are doing Yemen solidarity, and so on. So this is also a house of solidarity. But every Monday, we organize a cultural event, bring musicians, sometimes some of the best musicians in the country, and we play music and we do poetry and so on to encourage people to use the center. It is not everybody who is going to come into this center because they want to study Marxism. No. Some people want to come and listen to good music. But if they come and listen to good music, they may see the books, they may read the books, they may interact with us, and they may change their ideological position. So the music and cultural program is very important for us. Then every Wednesday, we meet here like this every Wednesday to discuss local and international issues. Any issue which is topical, we meet here, we discuss, we take positions, and so on. And then Fridays, we have what we call the Friday Film Club, where we show documentaries about Palestine, about Cuba, about Venezuela, about everything. And then we discuss the documentaries. So this is a very busy place. We do many other things, but for now, it's okay. We run a newspaper, and in the last 16 months, we have established a television station. And it's not a television station for Ghana, is a television station which is seen in more than 30 African countries. You understand? It is not easy. It is very difficult, extremely difficult for us. About 80% of the people who work in the television station are volunteers. We don't pay them and so on. So it's a very difficult enterprise, but we think it is important for the sustenance of the struggle. And that is the station which is telling the true story of all revolutionary forces and countries across the world. And we do hope that it will be possible to get some documentaries from Venezuela. We already have a few. For example, we have this documentary, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, and so on, which we show. But it will be useful to get a lot more documentaries. In fact, to be honest, so far, only Palestine has been able to give us a lot of documentaries. We're trying to get documentaries from all our friends. It's next to impossible. But those documentaries would help us in order to tell the true story. Sorry for speaking so much, but you see, when you have a friend amongst you, a very good friend amongst you, sometimes you tend to get verbal diarrhea. So please excuse my verbal diarrhea. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. At least you cut short, or you helped me in what I ought to have said about the Socialist Forum of Ghana. You laid it bare. We all now know and understand the kind of activities we are engaged in. Solidarity is very important. I attended a conference of the peoples in South Africa, and one of the main items on the agenda was how do we deepen solidarity with the peoples who are struggling for independence. And one which came up strongly was Venezuela, when we're thinking of attending the meeting in Caracas, which has been postponed as a result of the elections. And so we think and believe that promoting cultural exchange, promoting information amongst ourselves is one way of countering the mainstream media, what they put out. If we don't do that, there's very little or no avenue for one to be able to access information. And we thank the ambassador of Venezuela to Ghana, the foreign minister, the vice foreign minister, and all the our friends from the other embassies who have shown up here. We also do thank the leaders of the progressive political parties in Ghana and other progressive organizations who have come. We thank you very much. We'll be doing more of these things when we have other important visitors. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Viva Ghana! Viva! Viva Venezuela! Viva! Viva la unidad! Viva! Thank you, my brother.
Comrades, there is very good news. There was a resolution which was proposed in the UN Security Council. 7 countries voted against it, and 6 countries voted for it, so the resolution did not pass.
The Security Council. Against Syria. Very good news. This is the guy in charge. If he doesn't send you the documentary, because we have lots of documentaries and movies. Just for tomorrow, because after tomorrow I'm going to